Okay, so that morning after a nice restful night in a hotel, I was off. I wanted to get to El Salvador today from Guatemala City. So a few dips and turns, and I was starting out and leaving the city. Guatemala City is fairly expansive. Not a lot of really major visual reference points like great architecture, parks, anything like that. Just a lot of buildings, a lot of people, a lot of cars. The traffic is interesting. It's kind of hard to figure out your way through as far as what the city markings are. It's tough because sometimes you'll see a roundabout, maybe it's not really a roundabout. Sometimes you'll see a one-way street, or a lane will end. So there were a lot of things that I thought were kind of confusing going through Guatemala City, and I'm sure that if you've lived there for a while, it's not really that bad, and I'm making it sound worse than it is. But for me, it was a little bit hard to figure my way out of the city, especially not really using any kind of navigation through here. So just kind of went and had a little bit of lane splitting fun and a lot of traffic. Also, you'll notice that their trucks put out way more diesel smoke than any of our trucks, and sitting behind this dump truck was not a fun thing for me. So as you can tell, I tried to get past it as quickly as I could, so which was not that quick, unfortunately, due to the traffic once again. So made my way through the town, the city, and you can see that the further and further I get from the hotel or the city center, I think I was in La Zona 6. No, I don't think it was 6. It was like 12 or 14, so maybe I'm wrong. I feel like it was 6. That's the first that comes to mind. But anyway, as I get further away, traffic starts lightening up. Less intersections, more of kind of like, this is their version of a highway, I think, in Guatemala. I don't think I ever saw anything much more straight, wide open, or vehicles moving as quickly as they were on some of these sections. So it was nice because when you're on a big bike, it's really hard to split lanes if nobody's watching for you. But if you get these small bikes ahead of you and they start splitting lanes, then the other cars start watching for them, and they pay attention to the bikes. So then you can take a big bike through and kind of clear through the traffic. So it was nice to be able to count on them for that, and it was very helpful, and it helped me get out of the city, moving this way. Okay, so once we'd gotten through it, I started getting closer and closer to the border, to El Salvador. As I was getting here close to the border, I actually ran into some of my friends I had met at Moto Camp, and while I was at Moto Camp, I met a couple from Mexico who were going also down to Argentina. And I don't remember at what point in here I run into them, but I think it was either right as I was going through this part of town or a little bit closer to the border, but that I ran into them. In fact, I saw them, kept going. Now that I remember right, I saw them, kept going, and then when I got to the border, I saw them again, and we went through the border together. So this is just kind of wrapping around as you're still getting out of Guatemala City, working your way towards El Salvador. Once again, they have really rough roads there, a lot of people. It's a really awesome country, though. It feels like there's a lot to explore. It hasn't been really as developed yet as some of the other countries. It felt very different than even going through or around Mexico, because Mexico felt a lot more developed than Guatemala. So this is just the kind of long road to the border of El Salvador, and it was actually really exciting for me this whole morning, because when I was 19, I went on a mission for the LDS Church, and I lived in El Salvador. So I was a missionary in El Salvador, living in and amongst the people, with the people, for 2 years. I walked. I didn't have a bike there. Didn't have a car. Didn't have even a bicycle or anything. So we rode the buses, and you talked to people all day long. And while I was in El Salvador, I had always told myself that one day, somehow, some way, I would make my way back. So I was thinking about that this whole time going through. So I pulled up here. This is kind of to see the mountain border there between Guatemala and El Salvador. The guys in the little rickshaws got out and took pictures of me for me. I jumped back on the bike, and it was time to make progress because, like I said, I wanted to go in. I was going through Santa Ana, which is also somewhere where I had lived around. So it was going to be kind of a fun trip. It was kind of like the trip home. And the streets actually got nicer and nicer as we got closer to the border. I'd imagine a lot of that's just because they're less traveled, but they really did. The streets were pretty nice as I was coming down through here, approaching the border to go to El Salvador. So this is still, you still have quite a few people who are going in and through here, but I got to ride down and along here, and you can see just kind of trying to keep the bike clean. You'll see there's also a lot less people at this point. And because of that, you have less traffic, a little bit of an easier ride, and in that. So I was able to kind of get ready for that. The border there is pretty interesting to get to. There's a few different places that you can cross over, and I crossed over. I think it's called Jutiapa in Guatemala. I think I went from Jutiapa to Ahuachapan and kind of crossed over that way. So it was fun to kind of go through some of these last steps of Guatemala. I wish, honestly, that I'd have stayed a little longer. And right here, I was really nervous to pass the police because they don't really have a lot of speed limits, and you kind of wonder. So when I'd pass them, I would just wave, I'd smile, and I'd keep going. I guess if you don't think you're doing anything wrong, neither do they. So anyway, speeding up along here, almost to the border. We're getting so close, and I know that you all want to see what it's like on the other side. So we are moving through Jutiapa, I guess it would be Jutiapa, there towards Guatemala, towards El Salvador. And as you see, they kind of start slowing you down. You also see that these rickshaws in a lot of cases are people trying to help Americans get across, or foreigners cross the borders. So you'd pay these agents and they'd help you cross the borders. And so you'd see a lot of the rickshaws taking people, but you'd also see them taking people to the border. We're getting closer and closer. And if I don't... I may be mistaken, but I feel like as we got closer to the border, I think you do cross through one military site, which may be coming up here. But yes, this is essentially what it's like as you approach. You go from coming down the mountains to just these nice fields, a lot of vegetation, a lot of people prepping to cross the border. And keep in mind when you cross the border, and a lot of people don't think about this, there are, the border goes both ways. You have a border to leave Mexico and enter, and then another border to go into Guatemala. So you have to finish up your stuff with Mexico, give them all their documents, and then after that, then you do all of your new paperwork with Guatemala entering the country. So up here, I am leaving, in this case, leaving Guatemala, doing my paperwork, and right here's where I met back up with my friends from Moto Camp. So this is leaving Guatemala, and then after this, you cross the bridge. So this is coming out of the Guatemala station or border crossing. I'm leaving the Guatemala. I'm with my friends here from Mexico, and I'm moving up towards the bridge that I have been waiting for so long to go and see, to cross over the river and into El Salvador. So crossing into El Salvador, like I said, was a big deal for me. It was a huge deal. This is like maybe not getting to Argentina, but this is the second thing for me that was on my huge goal list. So I pulled over, snapped a couple of pictures midway through the bridge, just because here I was and I needed to make sure I got it. And then I kept going, and I'll show you some of those pictures here in a minute. But what we had to do is cross over and start doing paperwork. Unfortunately, it took like 4 hours at the El Salvador, at this particular crossing, because they don't have everything that they need to clear you. And so you fill out paperwork, they fax it over, they wait for clearances the whole time. So you're going back and forth with them for hours on end while you do it. So it was a little bit of a bummer that it took so long, but that was the case. So while we were there, I went back and I kept taking some more pictures. So this is going into El Salvador. You can tell I am slightly happy. And of course, you know, this was the goal. So this is, I would say, one of 2 major goals for me. The second, obviously, getting to Argentina. But the first one was this, you know, going back to El Salvador. How good does that feel? You know, I lived here. I feel like I'm part Salvadorian still. And of course, you know, of course I am. So it was really cool, especially to come in wearing like normal clothes. I'm not wearing a suit and tie. I'm not a missionary. I'm just regular me down to visit. So rode back out, got some pictures. I wasn't riding without my jacket on, just doing some shots on the bridge here. So not a big deal. So then we were cleared and I was on my way, and we had met a few different people. When you spend that much time at the border, you end up with a lot of different people. So we met 2 other guys, and we also met the motorcycle club of El Salvador, one of the official ones. They came and helped us cross the border and received us into the country. That was something that the guys from Mexico had arranged, and it was really nice. I think that they were doing that like at every border, and I think that was really helpful for them. Obviously, I was just with them for one border, so I got to experience it once. But it was pretty awesome to have these guys and see how passionate they were. It was funny because we worry so much about how nice our bikes are, or what we're riding, who we're riding with, you know how hard we're going, and what we're doing. And man, these guys, they just wanted to be on motorcycles. They didn't care. Two wheels are two wheels for these guys, and it was a lot of fun to ride around with people. I was a little nervous for them because their helmets and jackets and everything else, not really DOT. I would say a lot of these guys looked like if they went down, the helmet might be more dangerous than riding without the helmet. But it was really refreshing just to see people who were out there to ride bikes because they love bikes, and that's, I think, how we all start getting into bikes, and I hope that that's how everybody gets into bikes. But I really enjoyed getting to know them, and I was really grateful that those guys had lined that up so that we could all kind of ride together, even though I wasn't necessarily a part of the group. I kind of invited myself, I think. So this was fun. This is all going through Santa Ana, Huachapan, heading towards Santa Ana. El Salvador is actually a really small country. It's about the size of like Massachusetts, maybe, and I think they have around 10 million people living there. So you can imagine that pretty much everywhere you go in El Salvador, there are going to be people. There are going to be people on top of people. There are going to be houses on top of houses. So it's a very congested country, and I would say this is about as remote as it gets as far as what you'll see down there, especially on the western half. And when I was a missionary, I was only on the western half, and what that meant was that I never really went to any of the eastern half of the country. So San Salvador West was where I lived, and that was about all I ever got to know. So I was looking forward to that part of this trip too, is maybe seeing a little bit more of the country as I went. So you can see these guys are even riding two up. Two dudes, one bike, no problem, because they can be on a bike. That's all they cared. So I hope that you remember that the next time that your homie bro wants to ride on the back of your bike, you better just give him your hand, pull him on up, and sit on that bike with him. And these guys were happy, They're happy. A warm embrace. But we just cruised through. So eventually we made it to Santa Ana, and we were headed into the city. You can see it's starting to get more and more congested now that we're moving into Santa Ana. Santa Ana is a bigger city in El Salvador, but it's not, it's definitely not the capital. It's definitely not like being in San Salvador. They have a really cool cathedral there that you'll see on a lot of postcards and things, and we'll visit that. They have a nice open market. I remember that was the first place I ever saw people selling live iguanas and dead iguanas for pet and food. And just all the different things you would think that you would find in a Central American market. This was my first real experience with one. Back when I was 19 years old, I went here. So just walking through. But here we are, just pulling down into the city. Closer, closer. And we actually are going to ride all the way into the heart of the city with the motorcycle club. And you will see that it gets very congested. So once again, not really a police presence, not a lot of motorcycle or any vehicle laws here. Just try not to get in an accident, try not to die, and if you can do that, then they're pretty much okay with whatever you're doing. So, people tried to do what's right. There are some traffic lights and signs, but, it's kind of the Wild West down in El Salvador riding a motorcycle in Santa Ana. So we rode through, and it just felt like the streets got narrower and narrower as you kept going. More and more traffic, people, and it was all right. It was pretty fun. I find the adventure in that. I like kind of getting into these situations where it's harder to ride, or things are just so different than what it's like where you're from. So it was nice to see, just everything, sight, smell, everything is just completely different than what you're used to. So this is us as we're getting closer and closer and pulling down into the market, running out of space, cars parked in the street. Sometimes you're one lane, sometimes you're two. And we made it. So this is us. We're in the market right here. I knew these guys were going to go split and try and get around the cars in this bus, and I said, I think I can. Keep in mind my bike's probably 4 feet wide or something with the bags, but I made it through. But it's definitely something when you're lane splitting or even weaving in and out of traffic on a bike this big, you have to remember the bags go out further than even your handlebars. On a lot of bikes, you get in the woods or wherever, and you say, well, I can make it between these trees because my handlebars can. But when you have these bags on your bike, that's not an option. So here I'm going, okay, what way are we going? Street's closed. Oh, of course, we're going to go left and into the market. So at this point, there's really no room for anything. The cars can barely get through. You can barely get through. I guess if cars can get through, there's a lot of room for bike. But it was cool. Even being in this traffic jam, it was just a lot of fun to be slowly making our way into the market, slowly. And it's interesting because all the stores kind of just have open doors, some security, and they're really organic feeling. The stores are a part of the market. The store doesn't stand out on its own other than just the signs in the windows. You see all the clothes being sold here on the sides. And we're just making our way into El Mercado through here. And yeah, at this point you're weaving between even the people and in the road and the cars. Everything just kind of closes in around you, and yeah, it's not dangerous. It's fun. So I thought it was a lot of fun going through the market. And I wish that you could feel what you feel when you go through there. It's 100 degrees, people everywhere. You're just hoping that you can make it. I'm actually surprised people even take their cars through there. You'd think that your car would just get trashed going through there. But we were just winding our way through so that we can meet up with the other part of the motorcycle group. And those guys were at the cathedral. So, of course, we pulled up and we got to the cathedral so that we could meet up with those guys, take some pictures, grab some lunch. And after we met up with them, I was off and on my way. So here is the cathedral, downtown Santa Ana, El Salvador. The motorcycle club, you can see all the bikes lined up there at the bottom, kind of in the shadows. Okay, so after that I went to La Zona Hostel. It was right by my mission office where I used to go all the time. So it was weird to see this place and sleep in a place that was right there. It was cool because I got to keep the bike in that cage. Bunk beds, though, yeah, I know, I'm an adult. Bunk bed. Oh well, it was nice. No AC, though. After that, I went to the pupuseria I always used to go to. Very exciting moment for me to ride a motorcycle to the place I ate so many dinners. Sunday, I went to church. This is where I used to go. This is the family that used to make us lunch every day when I lived there. This is a picture of me while I was in El Salvador at age 19. And this is outside of Freddie's shop. Freddie used to let me walk by and sit on his bikes, and he had a bunch of different bikes back then, and I always thought it was the coolest thing ever that he'd let me take pictures on them. So it was very awesome for me to get back there. And actually, I took a picture of my bike outside that same shop. Freddie wasn't home, unfortunately, or else he would be in this video too. But very awesome to be able to get back and spend some time there. This is a video on Sunday because I actually was pretty sick. I think I just was dehydrated, but I had a really bad headache. Felt like I was just going to die. So I went to my friend Jared's house, and he let me jump in his car, and he drove me around town, one of the old areas that I worked in and lived in. He just took me around in his car that day so that I could get some shots of my old stomping grounds, I guess. So this is Colonia Miravalle. It's in San Salvador. And yeah, I used to walk up and down these streets. Pretty much everything you've seen so far I have done by foot. A typical day for me is about what we're going to drive in this short video. And we would just walk up and down these streets, knocking on the doors, seeing the statues. That actually was a new statue. That statue wasn't there when I was there before. And we would just teach about the church all around. So I would walk around all of this every day. You'd look for new people, set appointments, talk, chat, go. And it was incredible. It was so much fun living down there and doing that and just being so focused on one thing that you really just become an expert in that thing. So it was a lot of fun. These apartments here are new, so that wasn't there when I was there, but it was so cool just to go down and see all of this new urbanization. But actually, I guess it was a pretty busy part of downtown before. It's just been redone. So this is the street that I actually lived on. And I forget the name of it. I think it's actually Miravalle Street or Pasaje. It's either Miravalle or I don't know. I'll have to look later. I can't remember. But this is my street. I lived at the end of that alley right there. There's a door at the very end, and that was where I lived. So anyway, afterwards, went back to Jared's house, took medicine, laid on his couch, and then went back to the hostel. Went to Denny's that night to try and see if I could stomach some soup. And the next morning, I was off. So this is the border leaving El Salvador, going into Honduras. The plan today was to get as far along as I could. I wanted to get through the Honduras border, and I wanted to get over to the Nicaragua border in the same day. So I took some pictures at Honduras while I was waiting on things, leaving El Salvador. So many people there trying to get your money, asking for things, asking to help you. I would tell them I know Spanish, I know what I need to do. Made it through. Finally, I made it to the Nicaragua border. The problem at the Nicaragua border was that they weren't very organized, and I kept getting pushed to the back of the line. Oh, we need this. Oh, there's not a copy of that. Oh, do this. Oh, we've got to call this guy. And that went on. I got there around 1 o'clock. I didn't get out of that border crossing until about 5, and the sun was getting a little bit low in the sky, but I figured I'd ride until it was starting to be dark, and then I could find a hotel. Unfortunately, as I was going through one of the curves, there was actually a guy riding the bicycle that you see here, and he was right in the middle of the road, and I was going 50 or 60 miles an hour, and you guessed it, we collided. So when we hit, I hit the back of him, he went off the road, I went across traffic, bike on the ground, me on the ground sliding. I didn't have gloves, my gloves had been stolen at the border. I got up, I had my Garmin, called emergency services, and I started looking for him. I thought that I'd killed him. I had to tell myself, this was an accident. This is what happens in accidents, but I still wanted to help and see if I could find him. So when I finally found him, he was screaming in the ditch. He was alive, which was the best thing that I could find. The medical team came, they grabbed him. No one asked me how I was doing. People were trying to lay me down, and they didn't want me helping him either. When the police came, they took hours and hours and hours to go through the scene. It was terrible. The first thing I did, though, after I made sure he was okay, is I ran back to the bike, pulled all of my money off of the bike, pulled my passport, put all that in my pockets on my body. The only thing that happened to me was my hands got a little bit shredded. The police took my bike and put it in the truck, and then they put me in the truck because they were taking me into custody. In Nicaragua, if there's even a chance that somebody might die because of an accident, you go to jail until that person does or does not die. And from there, you either await trial because they did die, or you await a trial so you can figure out who is at fault for the accident. So I was in police custody. It was 1 a.m. It was a mess. The next morning, I went to the hospital, found out that the guy that I had hit, not only was he okay, he had 0 broken bones. It was a complete blessing. This is his bicycle. That is how hard it looks like it hit. It hit hard. So that is from impact. I figured out a settlement. It's a long story of what happened. But I will tell you that this is one of the best moments of my life, was getting that passport back so I could go home, because they held my passport the whole time I was in custody. That was their way of keeping me in the country, keeping me from doing anything. They didn't want me to flee, even though they had the bike and everything still too. But until I had it all settled and I had legal documents, I did not get that passport back. From there, the police did not help me. In fact, they didn't help me the whole time, but they didn't help me with anything. They gave me clearance for the bike. I had to push it back to the hotel, or the hostel that was there in town. I went and got some dinner. This is my friend. I met Arnaldo there. He is a stake president for our church. He helped me with everything. Total blessing. Family is amazing. He helped me arrange for a truck as well to take the bike to Managua, where I'd be able to arrange for shipping the bike back to the States. You can guess that with this, the trip was over, unfortunately, but I found some great food on the way to Managua with my driver and friend in the truck, and this is as we got into Managua, and I was able to get the bike to the Triumph dealer and find myself a hotel. So this will be my last hotel room on my trip. It's modern, I guess. It's called the Elements Hotel, and it's pretty small, but it's clean, it's modern, and I was hoping to do this earlier and give you a view of outside, but no, not really anything. The pool's down there. But yeah, there you go. There is my last room of my trip. I'll be here a couple nights. So the next morning, that night, I went out and got Chinese food, and well, yeah, this was the first time that food didn't stick so well, so I got kind of sick. And I also went out and looked for other food after the Chinese food. The next morning, had an awesome breakfast outside at the hotel. Really a nice little hotel there. And then that night, the night before I was going to fly out, I went and got some chimichurri and steak, and had great food there in Managua. You can't believe how happy I was to get on this airplane and get the heck out of there. Actually, that's not my airplane because I flew Delta, but that is the window. This is my Delta plane. This is me leaving Managua and coming home. You can see kind of the bruises coming around my elbows there. This is me finally back home. Hands healing, starting to get back to work. Beard growing in strongly like a strong man. But no, it was nice to finally have dexterity back in my hands. My hands still hurt, and it's August now. Picked up a 1290 Super Adventure R. Got my other bike back, moved all the parts, grabbed the 1290, started going on some adventures again. Just recently rode down, did a 3,000 mile trip down through California, got to see a little bit more of that, went down to Slab City. Maybe I'll make another video about this crazy little bit of action where I got stuck in the sand. But the reason I'm showing you all of this is just to say, yeah, bad things happen. That was the trip of my dreams. Hopefully I get back and find a way to finish it. But you know what? I'm happy. I'm doing well. A really bad situation turned out as well as it could have. And I've even already gotten to ride in a truck full of carrots. So thank you for following along with this one. Hopefully I will be able to get more footage up soon. Enjoy. Thank you.